There are around 5,000 people killed or seriously injured each year in collisions involving young drivers. About half of those are the young drivers and their passengers. Young male drivers under the age of 25, 4 times more likely to be killed than all drivers over 25, and it's the second biggest cause of death among 15 to 19-year-olds, behind only self-harm. 1 in 5 people in that age group who die as a result of collisions on the road.
They're startling statistics. And behind statistics are the families of the young people affected, and Sharon and Ian, your 2 families, amongst them, sadly. Sharon, perhaps you can tell me about Caitlyn. She was just 18.
Yes, that's right. Caitlyn was my youngest child of 3. She was just 18 years old, and on the evening of the 14th of July in 2017, she accepted a lift from her friend. Her friend had just passed a test 4 months previously, and the girls were going out for an evening meal in Cumbria. And Caitlyn was picked up, and 15 minutes later there was a fatal collision that had happened. And we've since found out that the newly qualified driver had entered a bend slightly too fast for her experience of driving, and lost control on entering a wet bend on a rural road. And sadly, the car with her trying to gain control spun onto the opposite carriageway directly in front of and into a van travelling in the opposite direction. And Caitlyn took the full impact of the crash into the front passenger seat where she was sitting, and I've been told she died on impact. The driver died too. She was also 18, and the backseat passenger was severely injured, as was the van driver. So through that crash, there was 4 families that were devastated, 2 bereaved, and 2 with serious injuries. And then not long after that, I found out through Break, the road safety charity, that a law called a graduated driving licence could have possibly saved my daughter's life. And so upon finding that out, I started researching about it a little bit more, and I found out then that I could also ask the coroner at the inquest to write a preventing future deaths report, and he wrote to the Department for Transport recommending that this should be implemented nationwide.
Yeah, the coroner saying in that preventing future deaths report that GDLs would likely have stopped the crash that killed Caitlyn from happening. How does it make you feel to know that it was inexperience that killed your daughter? It wasn't, you know, when we talk about road collisions and fatalities, so often you immediately think of drink driving, using mobile phones behind the wheel, speeding. This was just inexperience, a young girl. He was doing nothing wrong, but had only been on the road for a matter of months.
Yeah, and that's what I want to highlight as well, because I do find that young drivers are kind of, it's always thought of, as you say, the first thoughts are, oh, well, they must have been doing something wrong. Yeah. And this isn't true in this case. It was pure inexperience, and that's what I want to highlight as well, that many of these crashes are inexperience.
Ian, your daughter, all the things that a graduated driving licence would address, happened in Alice's case as well. Perhaps you could tell us about it.
So Alice didn't quite get to her 13th birthday, so 6 weeks. She was involved in a crash. So she was the passenger with her sister and their mum coming back from Alton Towers. They'd had a great weekend, and 5 young lads and their passengers decided it'd be a good idea to have a race. So the 5 cars were coming in the opposite direction, and essentially the second car in the convoy, who were all speeding, they were all distracted. It was a rural road. It's almost like doing a bingo with all the risk factors for a graduated driving licensing. Other than alcohol, they were all present in that crash. And the second car missed the bend and hit the car that my family were in. The driver managed to kill himself and his passenger, but also, tragically, my daughter was killed.
Well, I'm so sorry for the loss of Alice and Caitlyn. The government are not going for it, though, Sharon. It was debated by MPs in January. We've had this statement from the Department for Transport. Every death on our roads is a tragedy, and our thoughts remain with the families of everyone who has lost a loved one in this way. Whilst we are not considering graduated driving licences, we absolutely recognise that young people are disproportionately victims of tragic incidents on our roads, and we are exploring options to tackle the root causes of this without unfairly penalising young drivers. Now, I know it's the last bit of that last sentence, unfairly penalising young drivers, that you have an issue with. Sharon, perhaps you'd like to talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, well, with them saying they don't want to penalise young drivers, our children have been penalised from living their lives. And what we're wanting to do is, by GDL, we know it works in other countries, we know it reduces young deaths on the roads. We want this implementing to help save young lives, to give children, teenagers, a future. Our children's futures were taken from them by, as I said, not breaking any laws in the case of Caitlyn and her friend. So what we would reply to that, to the government, is that all these children that are killed on the roads, these young teenagers, they're being penalised from living their lives. We shouldn't have to bury our children and the response is, oh, sorry, it was inexperience. You know, we shouldn't accept that.
Well, what has the impact been in other countries? Because I know this is in the early stages in Northern Ireland, for example, but it's in Australia, the United States. What are the real-term effects of it?
The real-term effects where it has been implemented in those countries you mentioned, which are reasonably comparable to the UK, is between a 20 and 40% reduction in the number of collisions involving young drivers. That would likely translate to the UK, depending on which measures were implemented. And those criticisms around the measures can also be addressed with exemptions. All those countries have exemptions to the measures that are designed to give young drivers that experience, so that it doesn't impact on things like employment and caring duties.
You see this as a life-changing law, and I know that you wrote a letter last month on behalf of the siblings of those who've been affected by these fatalities, these life-changing incidents that can happen. What did that letter say? That was directed, well, that was sent to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. We
got 68 siblings, all of whom have lost a brother or a sister in a road collision. And what became fairly obvious, and for Sharon and myself and the others in Forget Me Not Families Uniting, who's the campaign group, we live this every day, so we understand firsthand exactly what that is like. But what became quite obvious talking to some of those young siblings was just how their lives had been completely devastated by the loss of a brother or a sister. And we thought, with the government not considering graduated driving licensing systems, we wanted to raise that voice. We wanted them to have a voice. So we wrote to the Prime Minister. We are waiting to hear what he has to say in response to not penalising young drivers. What about those 68 siblings who've lost a brother or a sister? And it was just another way of raising the issue of road death and road danger. And we just wanted a different voice. We don't feel we've been listened to. So we thought we'd try a different voice, and why not talk to the young people themselves? For those parents watching tonight, this will be an eye-opener, because a lot of parents don't know that a graduated driving licence scheme is even an idea that's out there. What would you say to those parents tonight about supporting you in this campaign? Because you're not done yet. This has been discussed a number of times by MPs. January, just the latest of those. It will come up again because of families like yours that won't let this go. What would you say to those who want to support you on this and help you?
Well, the thing is that is one of the things that I do want to get out to parents, because I didn't know of the dangers that evening when Caitlyn got in a car with a newly qualified driver on a rural road. And so I think that needs to be spoken about as well, is to let parents know of the dangers, to say to your children, no, you're not getting in that car because they've just passed their test. Or to say to your child, no, you're not putting your friends in the car because you've just passed your test. Because we know through research that with every extra same-age passenger, the crash risk increases. And that is what I need to get out to families, because I didn't know all that. And I didn't know about graduated driving licences before this happened to my daughter. I found out too late. And I don't want it to be too late for other families.